Imagine walking into your boss's office and giving notice because your writing has become your primary revenue stream, or your podcast is successful enough that you can quit your day job, or maybe having your marketing on autopilot so you can spend your time on the art career you love rather than on marketing. Are you a creative person who's great at what you do, but marketing makes you freeze? You're not alone. I help passionate, purpose-driven creatives overcome fear, find their brand voice, and build a marketing strategy that works for them. Oh yeah, I also make it easy and painless. It's never too late to grow the business you've been dreaming about. Book an introductory call with me, Rob Southgate, at southgatesmallbusiness.com today. And let's take the pain out of marketing together. Welcome to Ink Blots, the show where I interview authors about their lives, writing, and the books they love. Be sure to follow the Ink Blots podcast on Substack. Not only can you listen to the latest episodes, but our Substack also has interview transcriptions and links to books and other items that we talk about on the show. If you like what we're doing, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. It really helps us and our sponsors out. Oh, and leave comments. We really do read and respond to every one. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to Ink Blots. I am your host, Rob Southgate. Today I have with me Alistair Conwell, an author who I think you're going to find fascinating. Wait until we get into this one. We have stepped away from horror for an episode. We've had, Alistair, I don't know if you've been looking at what's been posting on Ink Blots, but I just did a whole series of horror authors. I'm so happy to be out of the crypt and into space. So, Alistair, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here, Rob. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. So, Alistair, let's start with this. Why don't you tell people about yourself a little bit? I mean, you've got an interesting story, and then we'll get into your book.
Sure. So I'm based in Australia. I'm a full-time author, and I've written 2 nonfiction books previously. The first one was called The Audible Life Stream. It came out in 2010. And then my second nonfiction book is called Soul Comfort, which came out in 2016. And my third book, the one that we'll talk about, is Circadian Web. It's just been released a few days ago, and it's a science fiction novel, although it has been, I've been told it's kind of genre bending. So it's principally science fiction, but gets into different genres.
I love that.
Yeah. I didn't intend it to be, but that's, how it's turned out.
You went with the flow. So, Alistair, just so that you know, we're not only going to talk about Circadian Web, because I do have questions about your other books as well.
Sure.
So why not? Let's get people into what you do and to start following you.
Sure.
Let's talk about Circadian Web. And by the way, thank you for getting on. I don't know what time it is in Australia right now, but I'm going to assume it's ungodly. So thank you. I've interviewed people from Australia before, and it seems like even though we both have 24 hours, it's so hard to line up between the two of us. So I am so thankful you're here.
You're welcome.
Give us the lowdown on Circadian Web, The Space of Time.
Sure. So it's a novel that weaves together science fact, science fiction, esoteric spiritual insights, and even psychological themes as well. And it's about 4 men with subconscious secrets on disconnected timelines, and mysterious women who are intent on either helping them or pushing them down the rabbit hole. And the story unfolds in America, Australia, and Taiwan. And the inspirations for the story are people like Philip K. Dick, who I'm sure a lot of your listeners would have heard of and read his stories, Blake Crouch, and even Emily St. John Mandel. Those 3 authors were really key inspirations for me writing Circadian Web.
Anyone that listens to my shows, Ink Blots is a newer show, so people may not have heard this, but if you listen to any of the other myriad of podcasts I do, they would know that Philip K. Dick is a favorite of mine.
Oh, fantastic.
I talk about Philip K. Dick all the time for so many different reasons. So you have me by mentioning Philip K. Dick. If you had mentioned Theodore Sturgeon, I would have gone catatonic. It seems like whenever I talk about him to science fiction authors, they go, who? And I'm like, how do you not know one of the two icons to me are Philip K. Dick and Theodore Sturgeon. So this is really interesting. Also, I know I'm going to tie this into your other books, because your other books, Secrets of Dying While Living, the Audible live stream, and then Uplifting Insight, Soul Comfort of Grief, Death, Consciousness. I have a feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're pulling from that as well here, because it sounds like we're playing with life, death, like the soul. It sounds like that's what you've got going in the space of time. Am I correct?
Absolutely right, Rob. Spirituality, consciousness, science, particularly quantum physics, are key themes of Circadian Web, and absolutely are themes, particularly in my first book, The Audible Live Stream. So it's not surprising. Those themes I've been interested for many, many years. And so it's not surprising that there are key themes in Circadian Web, absolutely.
Are you a Michio Kaku fan as well?
Yes, very much so.
I know when you say live stream and that, I'm like, he does string theory and
exactly.
life and death and sound, and I have a feeling
yes, you've hit the nail on the head. Yes. Even in the Audible live stream, I talk about quantum physics and specifically string theory. Because
which is Michio Kaku's thing.
Exactly. And even people like Brian Greene, Professor Brian Greene, who you may have heard of as well. And what I particularly like about string theory, and which is one of the reasons that prompted me to write my first book, The Audible Live Stream, is, as you know, that's cutting edge science. Quantum physics and string theory is right at the forefront. And what I find fascinating is string theory is absolutely congruent with ancient esoteric spiritual teachings, which is where the whole concept of the Audible live stream comes from. And so in my first book, The Audible Live Stream, I actually draw that parallel, those two theories. And yes, I do mention, as it turns out, string theory in Circadian Web. One of my characters is a lecturer, a university lecturer in quantum physics. So it's all absolutely tied in.
I could tell this by looking at the cover of the book.
Yes.
I think that you're laying hints in there already. So this is fascinating to me. You said that there are ties to Philip K. Dick. What parallels do you draw there?
Well, in the sense that, Philip K. Dick, he wrote about alternate realities, for example. And it's science fiction without the spaceships and the aliens. It's really quite what I would regard very clever science fiction, in the sense it makes us just think about reality, perhaps history. The Man in the High Castle comes to mind, where he had this alternate history.
Right.
So it's that sort of appeals to me, because it's kind of a thinking man or thinking reader's science fiction. And so that, I hope, is the sort of book I've written. It's a book that I hope, readers will be thinking about long after the last page, thinking about reality and perception, and our four-dimensional world that we live in, that we think is perhaps all there is.
So what inspired you to jump from nonfiction to fiction?
Well, interestingly enough, before I wrote my first book, my nonfiction book, I actually tried to write a novel. And it went nowhere because I had no skills. I had no idea what I was doing. And so it quickly ground to a halt, the novel I was working on at the time. And it was a very different novel to what Circadian Web is. And I ended up selling an article to a US magazine about the Audible live stream. And I got a great response from that. So that encouraged me to write my first book, which was nonfiction based on the success of that article. And then I think it would have been in 2021, my publisher, I'm based in Australia, but my publisher is in the UK. I got an email from them saying, your sales of your first book have been really good. If you write another book, we'd certainly be interested in having a look at it. And at that time, I was actually thinking about writing again, but more in the fiction line, because I wasn't sure I have another nonfiction book in me. And so it was encouraging to get that email from my publisher. And so I started thinking about it. And of course, as I mentioned, I've had this long-standing interest in spirituality and consciousness and quantum physics, etc. And so I started jotting down ideas, and I had all these ideas, but I had no way of working out, well, what am I going to do with all these ideas?
Right.
Until I got this flash of inspiration where I thought, what about if I combine some of these ideas? And that sort of opened up a story for me. And that turned out to be Circadian Web. So it was taking all my interests in those various themes, combining them and creating, what I hope are interesting characters, and developed a story around that.
Well, I think it actually, because you did this is just an opinion, right? But I like the idea that you wrote the nonfiction first, that you kind of laid groundwork there and let that inspire this, because I think that makes for richer, especially when you get into science fiction. I think it makes it richer. That's just my personal opinion. Everything you're saying is exciting to me. This is the kind of book that I am drawn to very much. Even though I just did all those horror things, and I'm drawn to horror as well. If you look at my bookshelf, you'll see a lot of this kind of Philip K. Dicky, Harlan Ellison-y type science fiction, where it's like, is it science fiction? It is, but it's playing with life and death and bigger concepts and things that you really need to process and take out of it. So I love this. So let's shift this up a little bit. Go to a little bit more of instead of focusing just on the book, let's talk about you a little bit. What is it about science fiction that drew you to that as the medium?
Well, I have a science degree with a major in psychology. And one of the reasons, and it's not my first degree was actually in business, but I was drawn to science fiction because of my interest in science. And my interest in science developed in researching my first book, The Audible Live Stream.
Sure.
So that has sort of propelled me to read more science fiction because of the scientific basis of a science fiction novel. And to pick up on a point, excuse me, that you made about, I suppose, the credibility of a story, and that while science fiction, yes, is an author's imagination and there could be some world building, I like to make a story, and I hope readers will see Circadian Web in this way, as a credible story. So it's not so far-fetched that it's just too incredible to believe.
Right.
So, I've tried to make the story credible and very believable, even though I'm I write about 3 future timelines.
Right.
So my interest in science fiction is because of my having studied science at university, and I've got a postgraduate degree in psychology as well. So hence, psychological insights are also a common theme in Circadian Web. It's dealing with characters who have subconscious secrets. What are those secrets, and how is that impacting on the main characters' lives, and the decisions they make, for example.
It's funny you say that. I'm also a college professor. I teach business. And
Right.
one of the things that I talk about with students all the time, I talk about it with my daughter as well, who's just about to start school,
Mm-hmm.
is the importance. I mean, you've got a wide variety to pull from there. Getting a psychology degree can absolutely work very well when you're writing, because you've got to have character, motivation, thoughts, all the things that psychology teaches you about. So it's all
Yes.
in line. And then a science degree, if you're going into science fiction, makes perfect sense because you understand. I can't tell you how many times I've read a crappy science fiction novel and you go, okay, none of this works. None of this. I mean, I get it. You can say it's science fiction. I'm imagining. Yeah, it's got to be grounded somewhat because there are laws to science that we have to play within. Some can be broken, some can. I mean, look at Star Trek.
Yes.
Star Trek, when it first came out, I mean, it felt like it was breaking rules all over the place, but was it? It played with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Time travel. Okay, they may not have gotten that right. The teleportation. I don't know. Philip K. Dick, I think, wrote a better teleportation story in one of his short stories, where I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense how that would work. So I find that really beneficial as a writer, as really anything. I mean, even in business, I tell them you could go study psychology, and what that could do for you in business is amazing. And if you're a writer studying some business, incredibly beneficial. It's all tied together.
Yeah.
You didn't need to hear that. You
Absolutely.
already knew that. You're already living it, right?
No, it's absolutely true. And when I was developing my characters for Circadian Web, because of my psychology background, what I did, I used the Myers-Briggs type indicator framework for my main characters, which again, I hope gives them depth and believability and credibility, as opposed to just characters on a page. So yeah, I tried to use as many of the different sort of skills and knowledge I had in the different elements of the story.
Did you find yourself, when you were plotting this out or when you were writing it, I just blew my question. Did you find yourself to be more of a plotter or a pantser as a writer?
Great question. And I run a couple of free writing workshops for aspiring writers, and these are the sort of questions and things that come up. I'm definitely first and foremost a planner.
Okay.
But what I found was I mapped out the story and the arc of the story, but as the characters developed, they took me to places I didn't initially anticipate, largely because of the dialogue that I was coming to me, basically.
Right.
And so, I mapped out a number of chapters and a number of scenes, but in the end, I didn't use some, because new scenes and new chapters were created because of what the characters wanted to say.
Right.
So it was started off as planning, deviated within the overall plan, and ended up, where I wanted to go, but there was quite a bit of deviation in between. And that's what I like to tell aspiring writers, do what works for you. Because I remember, I think I heard an interview about George R.R. Martin, one of the great writers of our time, with Game of Thrones. And he's very much a pantser. He just sits down apparently, and he writes what
He
comes to
just
him.
goes. Yeah.
Exactly. I couldn't do that, but I leave room for that within the story arc that I've plotted out. So it's a bit of both, but largely planning to begin with.
Yeah, I think that the authors that are strictly planning and nothing deviates, I think their stuff tends to not have quite the emotion to it because
Mhm.
it is so outlined. We can think about our lives and we can think about what we plan to do with our lives, but if it followed that path exactly, it would get awfully boring at some point. The characters don't like to be boring. So, but
That's
also
right.
pantsers can be tricky too, though. Like you said, George R. R. Martin, I've talked to plenty of authors that are like, I just go. I say I'm going to do 2,000 words a day and I just write. I'm like, whoa, how do you
Wow.
know where to end? you know, I feel like you have to have a little bit of a framework. Now, when you hear your characters, this is such a bizarre question. I'm just going to warn you up front. Do
Okay.
you said that the dialogue dictates where the story goes sometimes. This is the weird one. Do you actually hear them, or do you feel like you're writing and they kind of say it through your fingers? What? Yeah, because I've talked to people that feel like they actually hear something. How do you get the message?
Yeah. Look, there's an element of hearing, and what I found was I like to meditate each day,
Okay.
usually in the morning. And I was finding when I was in the middle of writing Circadian Web, excuse me, instead of meditating during my meditation time, I was getting the dialogue coming to me.
Okay.
And so, and so I would have to, after the meditation, so-called meditation in inverted commas, I would have to quickly either go to my laptop or quickly scribble down the bare bones of the dialogue in whatever scene was coming to me. And it wasn't necessarily the scene I was working on at that time. It might have, could have been a future scene several chapters ahead, for example. Um, so there's an element of hearing I was finding when I'm not even sitting at my laptop.
Hmm.
It was just inspiration that was coming to me, whenever.
I find that interesting. When I was attempting to be a writer, writing scripts, and
Yes.
dialogue is exactly where that happened. I would always tell my wife it's like the old idea of the third eye. I'd be sitting there writing, and you kind of started going to a meditative state basically, and I would pretty much hear my characters. And if I started
Wow.
writing something that was not where they wanted to go, I would actually occasionally get told no. Like, oh, oops. Yeah, you'll find this interesting. I was interviewing one author, a horror author, and he was saying that he had it plotted out and he was trying to listen to the characters, and he said something wasn't working, and he said he got real close to the end, and his one character, when he was meditating, said to him, I'm a female. And he went, oh. And he said he went back and he said, if I change that to a female, and he said it completely changed the book, completely changed everything, made it such a better
Wow.
book. And he said it was a voice that told him, hey, you're writing me wrong. I just find that
Gee.
fascinating because I don't think it
Yeah.
works that way for everybody. Like you said,
No.
you go with what works for you.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and you deal with sound. So the sound and the hearing has to be an important point for you. Let's talk about the Audible live stream.
Sure.
Uh, Now, with Audible Livestream, you talk in here about uh, obviously you're using meditation. You have a background in this, it sounds like. You're talking about this. What did you call it here? Um, the Audible Livestream being like sound that runs through everything, right? Am I getting that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And I find this really interesting. Like I said, I'm interested in music theory. I'm interested in what Michio Kaku says with string theory. My dad was an avant-garde jazz musician. So the way
Mm.
I interact with music and the way I hear it is going to be similar but different. And I always found this interesting how some people can hear music that I don't like at all and think, my God, it's the greatest thing ever. I, I think that the vibrations that we're tuned into are what dictate that. And when you talk about this audible live stream, let's get into that. Is this something that you feel? Describe what that is to me. I don't need to ask it. I want to hear
Sure.
what you say.
Sure. So the audible live stream is a very ancient spiritual concept, and it's actually the basis of, I think, nearly all mystical traditions of mainstream religion, even though adherents to mainstream religion probably aren't aware of it. And even adherents of the mystical traditions of mainstream religion aren't probably aware of the true esoteric meaning of it, which is what, one of the reasons that prompted me to write the book, to actually lay this all out and explain it and provide evidence of the audible live stream. So it's a spiritual vibration that is the very basis of reality, all dimensions, and it's kind of the connecting threads of the different dimensions, because it's the underlying vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, you're obviously aware of string theory, and string theory says that the basis of reality are these vibrating strings, which can be open or closed like rubber bands. So my view is that these vibrating strings are essentially the vibration of the audible live stream. They're exactly the same concept. They're just different terms in the different domains, one being quantum physics, the other being esoteric spirituality, but they describe exactly the same concept. Because even string theorists like Michio Kaku will say that, and Brian Greene will say that these quantum strings, these superstrings, can actually sound like music.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the same with the audible live stream. If one can tune into the higher vibrations of the audible live stream, usually through meditation, but sometimes it can be spontaneous, it can sound like music.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you think about meditation, when you do we'll say Om is the one that most people are familiar with, but you are trying to reach a vibration, and
Exactly.
you're tapping into whatever that is. That's what actually made me aware of the string theory, and I went, this makes perfect sense to me. And when you talk about like music therapy and sound therapy with people, we do react to sound, whether it's audible or it's just a tuning that we are set to. At least that's how I view it. And this
Absolutely.
idea of an audible live stream is really interesting to me. And like I said, I can imagine that affects your science fiction writing as well, because if you believe that, you can't break that rule, right?
Exactly. Yes. Sound theory does play a role. You're right, in Circadian Web as well. And in
So,
the audible live stream, sorry, I was just going to say, in the audible live
no.
stream, I do talk about sound theory as well and music therapy.
Okay,
And
good. Glad I mentioned it.
You might have heard about the Mozart effect as
Yes.
well. I think Don Campbell wrote a book about that. So yeah, all very, very interesting concepts and topics, definitely.
It's funny. We used to own a children's store and baby store, and the parents all wanted Mozart because they had heard of the Mozart effect, and they said, my kid's going to be super smart. And the problem
Yeah.
was they didn't know that the effect only lasts for a couple minutes. But
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yep.
but yeah, it's short-term effect. But
I
what I
see.
think it ties into is I believe that it's not that it's Mozart, it's that music is tied into where string theory would come in, where that vibration is, and it puts you at that vibration. If you can find a way to put yourself at that vibration, that's
Yep.
when you get a longer term effect. And the more you can do that, the more you can build those neural pathways that allow you to be more intelligent. It's just like having experiences. I read an article once in Psychology Today that new fathers are smarter than non-fathers. And
Oh.
so I thought, oh, hey, I'm a new dad. I got to read this. I'm smarter. And really what the crux of it was this same thing, that when you have experiences, even for a baby, it's listening to Mozart for the first time, you're creating new neural pathways that make you smarter. But then you got to feed that pathway. And that's why the Mozart effect has a shorter term. It has to keep getting fed to build that pathway to get your brain thinking that way. So,
right.
Alistair, I am fascinated by your books.
Fantastic.
I am completely fascinated. So you mentioned a few different authors. Let's do a cheap question. We're almost out of time.
Sure.
I want you to name 3 authors, and it does not have to be science fiction, that you think everybody should be reading.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, and you keep it to 3, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a break on it. It's 3 that you think of right now, because what happens every time I ask a question like that is 10 minutes later, oh, I didn't mention, I don't care. The 3 that came into your head right now, that vibration that hit you, give me 3 that everybody should be reading.
Sure. Well, can I give you a title? Because the author's name might actually evade me. But there's one book I read recently. It is science fiction, but again, more probably like a Philip K. Dick type science fiction. It's called The Other Valley. He's a Canadian author, and I think it's someone Alexander or Alexander someone. I can't remember.
Scott Alexander Howard.
Yes, thank you. Fascinating book. Loved it. Highly recommend it, and I mentioned it to a few people. Look,
that's one.
This is I mean, I'm going to say it, but you're going to think, oh, it's a bit glib. But I'm a big fan of Stephen King. Not so much his horror.
Why would I say it's glib? I think King's a great answer.
Yeah, to me, he's just a great writer of stories.
Yes.
And I've read a couple of his books, not his really famous ones, but I've read Joyland and Later, which, haven't made a big splash on the world. I'm not aware of it, but thoroughly enjoyed them.
Yeah.
The other book or author, again, I've forgotten his name, but the title is Anna O.
Anna O.
Yes, he's a British author, and I think it's his first book.
Got it. Matthew Blake.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting book, because it's about a female who is in a sleep state, but they need to bring her back out to solve a crime.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting premise. Thoroughly enjoyed that one as well. So there are 3.
You gave 3. You gave 3 solid ones. I'll try to get those in the show notes too, so people can check them out easily.
Right. Yeah. Excellent.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm encouraging everybody to buy Circadian Web. And if you want to get all sciencey, pick up Alistair's other books. It's Alistair Conwell. Alistair, what is the best place for people to interact with you?
I do have a Facebook page.
Okay.
And I've set up pages for each of my books. So if someone was to do a search on Facebook for Circadian Web, for example, they'd be able to find me that way.
Great.
And I check my Facebook every day. So that's probably the best way.
Then we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. Yep, that'll be great.
Wonderful. Well, Alistair, one last question. I'm sorry, I said there was one last. I'm blowing that. Before we jumped on, I asked you if this was part of a series, and you said there might be a sequel at some point. Is there something brewing there?
Look, it's very much embryonic at this stage in terms of I've got some ideas for a potential sequel for Circadian Web. But I've also got other ideas for possibly other stories. So I'm not quite sure which way I'm going to go at this stage. But certainly there's a few ideas that are swimming around in my head at the moment. We'll see where
Wonderful.
they take me.
Wonderful. Yes, you're going to be a pantser about this and see where it pulls you. Alistair, it's Alistair Conwell. I just put an R in there. Circadian Web. Alistair, thank you for being on. Good luck with this. I can't wait to read this. And I am so interested in the Audible live stream. We might have to have another discussion about that at some point.
More than welcome. Yeah, more than happy to do that. And I've really enjoyed the conversation, Rob. Thanks so much. It's been very interesting.